What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down Kokomi. She's definitely got a simpler kit than the Raiden Shogun, but there's still some things that we can dive into. For instance, one of the most asked questions I get is, can she still do damage even though she can't crit? So we're going to be looking into that as well as some of the other things in her kit, so strap in and let's get into it. Alright, so let's start with Kokomi's role. She is going to be a main carry DPS character, which should not be confused with a main DPS character because you typically won't have her on the field unless you are using her elemental burst. If you're familiar with the playstyles of Xiao or Noelle, then Kokomi is going to feel very familiar. Her elemental burst is very similar to these guys where she enters a powered up mode. So while filling this main carry role, very similar to Xiao and Noelle, she's also going to be a healer. In addition to that, she's also going to be a pretty decent hydro applicator, but we're going to have to verify that when she actually releases. Now we can get into a whole argument on what it means to be a main DPS or main carry, as most people would typically classify them as such if they are a character that stays on the field the most to deal their damage. So we're going to get into Kokomi's damage in a little bit, but at the end of the day, her playstyle and role is very similar to that of Xiao and Noelle. Kokomi's stats are quite average and also kind of on the low side as well. Her base attack is only 234, so compared to other 5 stars whose base attack is around the 300s when they are primarily a main DPS character. 234 base attack is around the level of a 4-star, so this matches about the same attack as Razor, but is slightly lower than the likes of Fischl and Rosaria. Her base HP is also not the highest among our 5 stars. Hu Tao, Zhongli, and Jean have the highest HP in the game, and her HP is actually quite average among 5 stars. It's close to Albedo, Eula, Kazuha, which are around the 13,000 mark at level 90. So with average stats like that, I can't help but be a little bit disappointed since they are advertising Kokomi as a 5-star character. Lastly, her ascension stat is extra hydro damage bonus. Now let's go ahead and move on to her skill breakdown. We're first going to start with her normal attacks and charge attacks, and it's a very basic 3-hit attack combo with a catalyst that has pretty good scaling. At talent level 8, it's going to give you 596% scaling with 3 hits into a charge attack. Without the charge attack, you're hitting about 358.75% scaling, so this means the charge attack has a lot of damage and scaling on it. It, however, does cost a whole lot of stamina. It costs 50 stamina to execute this for 237% damage scaling. Now, most other catalyst users also cost 50 stamina in order to execute their charge attack, but usually in their kits, they have some kind of system to reduce the amount of stamina it costs. Kokomi has no way to reduce the amount of stamina she consumes when using her charge attack, so you'll have to be very mindful when using this move. While in our elemental burst, we'll also get more damage bonus on these attacks, but we'll go into more depth about that when we talk about her elemental burst. Her E skill, Karage's Oath, is going to summon a jellyfish that is immediately going to apply the wet status onto Kokomi. It's going to deal hydro damage to opponents and heal by your party members at fixed intervals that is based on Kokomi's max HP. So for reference, if you get your Kokomi up to about 30,000 HP, at its base you're going to be healing 2,900, but after factoring her passives and a healing bonus circlet, you're going to be healing about 4,300. This move scales with however high her attack value is, but also gains bonus damage with her elemental burst like her normal and charge attacks. This skill lasts 12 seconds and has a 20-second cooldown, but this cooldown and duration is not going to matter much when we go into her elemental burst. The jellyfish itself will also proc about once every 2 seconds. Kokomi's elemental burst. So a very similar burst to the likes of Noelle and Xiao, but there is an initial skill damage that is based purely off of Kokomi's max HP. This is in fact the first attack in the game that scales purely off of a character's HP without any additional scaling from her attack. I could be wrong about this, so let me know down in the comments if there's another character whose skill is based purely off of a character's HP. When her normal and charge attacks hit opponents, she'll heal her teammates based off of her max HP as well, and at its base, it's going to heal 531 HP per hit, but after factoring passives and a healing bonus circlet, you're going to heal for about 767 per hit. This also assumes you have about 30,000 HP. Now, it is unclear whether or not you will heal more if you hit multiple enemies with your charge attack, for example, so we'll just have to wait and see if she can heal more if she hits more enemies. She's also going to gain a resistance to interruption and be able to walk on water. That extra gimmick is probably going to be pretty nice for the overworld, but largely for the abyss is going to be useless. This skill is going to last 10 seconds and has a cooldown of 18 seconds, so you'll have about 8 seconds of downtime. However, if we do factor in the time it takes for the animation to happen, this downtime is probably going to be more like 6 seconds or less. The energy cost is 70, which is exactly the same as Xiao, so they really do have similar types of bursts. And then while in this mode, her normal, charged, and her elemental skill is going to do increased damage based off of her max HP. But this is where things get kind of confusing because it's not clear what kind of damage bonus this is. So there are a couple ways that this can work. Some are definitely a lot more OP than others, so we're gonna go through the 3 ways that this could possibly work and decide which one makes the most sense. The first type of damage bonus is just a true damage bonus, like hydro damage bonus from a 2-piece Heart of Depth, for example. So if it worked this way, if we take a look at the scaling, it says we get a damage bonus of about 7.74% of our max HP. So if we just take an arbitrary amount of HP like 30,000 and take 7.74% of this, we end up with 2,322. 7% of your max HP didn't really seem like much, but when you actually do the math, it ends up being a really high amount of damage bonus. So 2,000% extra damage bonus seems a little bit too strong. So this is most likely not how it's going to work. The next way would be an additive scaling to her attacks, but this is also way too strong. Adding 2,300% scaling to each of her attacks seems way too powerful. So I don't think this is how it's going to work either. The third and most probable way that I can think of how this is going to work is like Zhongli's Ascension 4 passive. If you're unaware of how this works, it's just a flat damage increase to your attacks. This flat attack will still be affected by enemy resistances and extra damage bonuses, so that's why I think this makes the most sense on how her damage bonus is gonna work. I'm going to get a bit technical here with some damage formulas, so hopefully it makes it a little bit more clear. At its surface level, damage is equal to your character's attack multiplied by the talent percent scaling multiplied by 1 plus your damage bonuses. This formula does not take into account enemy defense or resistance, but that's pretty simple. You would just multiply the defense multiplier and res multiplier after calculating the damage output. Now in that simplified damage formula, the attack itself is also another formula. So your attack is your character's base attack, which is your character's natural attack value, plus the attack value of your weapon. You then multiply that by 1 plus any attack percent bonuses you have, and then you add any amount of flat attack bonuses. Typically those flat attack bonuses are going to be coming from those flat attack artifact substats. And for Kokomi, this is where we're going to add her additional damage bonus. So since the flat attack bonuses are added here, it means that it will be affected by enemy defenses, resistance, and damage bonuses, like 2-piece Heart of Depth for extra hydro damage bonus, for example, or the Shred from a 4-piece Viridescent Venerer. If this was just flat damage added at the very end of the damage calculation, it would be really rigid and never change. So it would essentially be really bad if it behaved that way. So hopefully that made sense. And if we take the example from earlier, 7.74% of 30k HP is about 2,300. So we add an extra flat 2,300 attack to the formula here. The damage here ends up being pretty reasonable, so I think this is going to make the most sense for how her damage calculations are going to work. Next up are her passive skills. Her first passive skill is that if her E skill is on the field, when she activates her elemental burst, it is going to refresh the duration of the jellyfish. Note that this is a refresh and not a reset. Don't get those two things confused. This means that effects that require you to use a skill don't synergize very well with this passive. For example, the 4-piece Heart of Depth set requires you to use an E skill in order to activate the normal and charge attack bonus for 15 seconds. But since this is a refresh, the bonus is going to go away once those 15 seconds are up, even though the jellyfish gets refreshed when you use your burst. Because remember that this is basically an extension of the E skill, and you won't be pressing your E skill button again. Her second passive is that when she is in her burst mode, her normal and charge attacks get a bigger increase based on her max HP that is further based on her healing bonus. This makes it so that you really want to build a healing bonus on your circlet headpiece and maybe consider using a 2-piece maiden set for an extra 15% healing bonus. She can't hit any crits anyway, so you don't need to be worrying about getting any crit substats or a crit headpiece. And this leads into her last passive skill. She gains an extra 25% healing bonus but gets a minus 100% crit rate. Now some of you might be thinking that there might be a way to build for over 100% crit rate, but I'm just gonna say that it's probably not going to be worth it trying to farm those substats. And it's also not even clear whether this means a flat minus 100% or if it just straight up sets your crit rate to 0, because we all know how the translations in this game goes. It's really not that great. You should definitely just try to build healing bonus so you can get extra damage bonus on your attacks. But it doesn't mean you can't try. I think that the amount of effort required to do this is going to be too great for most people, but it could be a fun meme build. Next up are some artifact set considerations you guys should make. So the first one is a Tenacity of the Millilith set, and this is more for a support type role, giving your team an extra 30% attack percent support for the whole team with her E skill. Just make sure that the E skill hits the enemies, and this artifact set is also going to give you an extra 20% HP, also furthering your damage output while in your elemental burst mode. 4-piece Heart of Depth is a pretty decent option, but remember that the refresh will not reactivate the bonus. It's a nice 15% hydro damage bonus as well as extra normal and charge attack bonus. The Maiden's Beloved is a good consideration, but only the 2-piece in order to get an extra 15% extra healing bonus. The 4-piece set will not increase your damage any further, but if you do just want more healing, then you can go with the 4-piece set. And then of course you can just go for classic artifact builds, elemental damage percent, and then attack percent, or maybe even 2-piece Millilith for the extra HP percent. Given that Kokomi's base HP is much better than her base attack, going with the 20% HP is probably going to be better because you'll get higher damage bonuses instead of trying to increase her base attack and the base scaling of her moves. This damage bonus would however only apply during her elemental burst. Now are her weapon choices, and really what we want to do is pretty much ignore all weapons that give us crit. This means the Widsith, the Royal series, the Blacklist series, Lost Prayer's 5-star weapon, the Solar Pearl, and I think that's all that I can really think of that give us crit. But if you are considering using a 5-star, it's not a bad option because they really are really big stat sticks. But just know that any crit is going to be pretty much useless on Kokomi. So what we're really looking for are weapons that give us extra HP. This is the 4-star prototype Amber, the Thrilling Tales, and of course her signature weapon that will be coming with her banner. And then there's the Sacrificial Fragments. This one is kind of in a weird spot because it's not clear whether or not we can have 2 jellyfish on the field at the same time. Currently in the game, Fischl is not allowed to have 2 of her Oz on the field, but on the other side, Amber is allowed to have 2 of her Baron Bunnies, and Ganyu can summon 2 of her flowers. So really, we're gonna have to wait and see for this one, but I'm leaning towards the no side. We'll do more in-depth analysis for weapons and artifact sets in another video, and maybe constellations, so stay tuned for that. And if you want to know when those come out, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. So even though Kokomi is designed to be played around her elemental burst, there is a playstyle that you can put Kokomi in, and that's a pure support Kokomi. She's going to be a hydro applicator, mostly in this role, and you can customize her with the Millilith set if you also want her to give attack percent bonus. But with this playstyle, you are largely going to ignore her elemental burst, so there isn't really a need to build for healing bonus or too much HP. Of course, that decision is ultimately up to you, but since we're not using her burst, we don't really need the HP for extra damage unless you want that for extra healing. Same thing goes for the healing bonus. If you don't want the extra damage, you don't need to, but if you want the extra healing bonus, then feel free to still build for it. So the reason why we would play this role is because it basically fills a similar role to Xingqiu. In the Abyss, we know how strong Pyro DPS characters are, and currently we don't have too many great hydro applicators. If you use Xingqiu on one team, he's not going to be on the other. So having another hydro applicator could be the #1 reason why you might want to pull for her. This is completely an asterisk though, because she's not released yet and her hydro application is still up in the air. It is only going to occur every 2 seconds at best, if each hit actually applies Hydro. And we also still have to test if it's enough to keep up with the Pyro application. We don't actually know how strong the Hydro that is being applied with her E skill. And so if you are going for this playstyle, then the weapons that you want to go for are attack weapons in order to bolster the damage of her E skill as much as you can. Because without her elemental burst, this move scales purely off of your attack stat. But of course, if you want to value the healing of the move more than the damage, then just build for healing bonus and HP. Now let's just have a pretty quick look at her damage with just a typical build with a 2-piece Heart of Depth and a 2-piece Maiden set while wielding the prototype Amber. Her overall stats ends up having about 83.2 extra Hydro damage bonus this way with the Ascension stat, the Goblet, and the Artifact set bonus, as well as about 75.9% extra healing bonus. Her HP ends up being about 38,907 with my setup on the HP percent Sands, as well as some substats, 6 rolls of HP percent and 6 rolls of flat HP. And so if we take a look at her normal charge attack, E skill, and burst skill damage, you'll notice that when she is not in her elemental burst form, she really does hit like a wet noodle. She hits for about 3,000 damage with her normal attack combo, the 3-hit string, but while in her burst, that goes up to 24,000. Her charge attack is also not very powerful without her burst, only about 2,000 damage, but a burst enhanced charge attack does about 18,000. Likewise, her E skill is pretty weak without her burst, dealing only about 1,600 damage, but while in her burst, it does about 7,500. And then her straight burst damage is also not quite that good, it's just a percentage of her HP, and with 39,000 HP, she ends up dealing about 6,486, which is about 17% of 39,000. So let me know down in the comments what your plan is for Kokomi, and let me know if there's anything else that I missed. If you like what you saw today, then consider subscribing to my channel, and until next time, I will see you guys later.